The unlikely beginning. Sarah Martinez never imagined that her steady hands, which had guided countless ambulances through the chaotic streets of Chicago, would one day grip a rifle in the mountains of Afghanistan. At 28, she was known throughout the city's emergency medical services as the driver who never lost her cool, never missed a turn, and never gave up on a patient. The daughter of a construction worker and a school nurse, Sarah grew up in a modest neighborhood where sirens were as common as church bells. Her childhood was spent watching her mother patch up scraped knees and listening to stories about saving lives. When other kids dreamed of becoming movie stars or athletes, Sarah dreamed of racing through traffic to help people in their darkest moments. After high school, Sarah enrolled in emergency medical technician training. The coursework came naturally to her, but it was behind the wheel of an ambulance where she truly excelled. Her instructors were amazed by her ability to navigate through heavy traffic while maintaining perfect stability for the medical team working in the back. She could thread an ambulance through spaces that seemed impossible, all while keeping her patients as comfortable as possible during the most critical moments of their lives. For 6 years, Sarah worked the night shift, responding to everything from heart attacks to car accidents to domestic violence calls. She developed an almost supernatural ability to read the streets, anticipating traffic patterns and finding shortcuts that even seasoned taxi drivers didn't know. Her partner, Jake, a veteran paramedic with 15 years of experience, often joked that Sarah could probably drive blindfolded and still arrive at the hospital faster than anyone else in the city. The calls that affected Sarah most were the ones involving young soldiers returning from overseas. Chicago had a large military hospital, and she frequently transported wounded veterans who were struggling with both physical injuries and invisible wounds that ran much deeper. She would listen to their stories during the quieter moments of transport, hearing about battles in distant places with names she could barely pronounce. One particular night in October changed everything. Sarah and Jake responded to a call about a veteran who had collapsed in a downtown apartment. When they arrived, they found Marcus, a former Army Ranger who had lost his leg in an IED explosion in Iraq. He was conscious but clearly in distress, not from any physical ailment, but from the weight of memories that seemed to crush him. During the 20-minute drive to the hospital, Marcus talked about his time in combat, about the friends he had lost, and about how he struggled to find purpose in civilian life. He described the precision, dedication, and brotherhood that had defined his military service. Something in his voice resonated deeply with Sarah. She realized that the same qualities that made her excellent at emergency medical response, quick thinking, steady nerves, and an unwavering commitment to helping others, were exactly what Marcus described as essential for military service. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself thinking more and more about Marcus's words. She began researching military opportunities, initially curious about how her medical training might translate to battlefield medicine. What she discovered surprised her. The military needed people with her exact skill set, not just as medics, but as soldiers who could perform under pressure and make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. Sarah started visiting the local Army recruiting station during her days off. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a career soldier with deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan, was initially skeptical when this petite ambulance driver expressed interest in combat roles. However, after several conversations, he began to see something special in Sarah. Her experience in emergency situations had given her a unique perspective on crisis management that most recruits lacked. The decision wasn't easy. Sarah loved her job and felt a strong connection to her community in Chicago. Her parents were worried about her safety, and Jake couldn't understand why she would want to leave a stable career for the uncertainty and danger of military life. But something deep inside Sarah knew that she needed to challenge herself in ways that driving an ambulance, no matter how skillfully, could never provide. After months of consideration and preparation, Sarah made her choice. She walked into the recruiting station on a cold February morning and signed the papers that would transform her from a Chicago ambulance driver into a United States Army soldier. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez smiled as she completed her paperwork, noting that her steady signature didn't shake even slightly despite the magnitude of the decision she was making. The transition period was both exciting and terrifying. Sarah had to give notice at the ambulance company, arrange her affairs, and prepare herself mentally for the complete life change that lay ahead. Her colleagues threw her a farewell party, with Jake presenting her with a small medical kit that he insisted she take with her wherever the Army might send her. On her last day of work, Sarah took one final ride through the streets of Chicago, memorizing the skyline that had been her backdrop for so many years. As the ambulance moved through traffic one last time under her control, she reflected on all the lives she had touched and all the skills she had developed. She had no idea that these same skills would soon be tested in ways she never could have imagined, in a place far from the familiar streets of home. The woman who had spent years racing through urban traffic to save lives was about to embark on a journey that would transform her into something entirely different. A warrior who would use those same life-saving instincts in the mountains and deserts of a war zone thousands of miles away. Sarah Martinez was ready to discover just how far her courage and determination could take her. Forged in fire. The bus that carried Sarah to Fort Benning, Georgia, was filled with young men and women from every corner of America, each carrying their own reasons for joining the Army. As the vehicle rolled through the gates of the infantry training facility, Sarah felt her stomach tighten with anticipation. The sprawling base, with its endless rows of barracks and training facilities, looked nothing like the familiar streets of Chicago. Basic training hit Sarah like a thunderclap. Drill Sergeant Thompson, a weathered veteran with deployments across 3 different conflicts, took one look at the former ambulance driver and decided she would need special attention. From the first morning formation, when Sarah struggled to keep pace with the larger recruits during the initial run, Thompson made it clear that her previous experience meant nothing here. The physical demands were unlike anything Sarah had experienced. While driving an ambulance required stamina and alertness, military training demanded a completely different kind of strength. Push-ups, pull-ups, and long-distance runs under full gear pushed her body to limits she didn't know existed. Many nights, she fell onto her bunk with muscles screaming and hands raw from handling weapons and equipment. But Sarah's emergency medical background proved invaluable in unexpected ways. During weapons training, her steady hands and ability to remain calm under pressure allowed her to excel at marksmanship. While other recruits struggled with the stress of live fire exercises, Sarah found the controlled chaos familiar. The same focus that had allowed her to navigate through traffic while monitoring a patient's vital signs now helped her place shot after shot into the center of targets downrange. The tactical training was where Sarah truly began to shine. Combat scenarios that simulated battlefield conditions reminded her of the high-pressure emergency calls she had handled for years. When instructors created chaos with smoke, noise, and time pressure, Sarah's mind automatically shifted into the same mode that had served her during the worst ambulance runs. She could process multiple pieces of information simultaneously, make quick decisions, and execute them without hesitation. Her fellow recruits began to notice Sarah's unique abilities. During night navigation exercises, when teams had to move through unfamiliar terrain using only map and compass, Sarah's spatial awareness and ability to read landscapes served her well. The same skills that had helped her find the fastest route through city streets now helped her guide her squad through forests and hills without getting lost. The leadership training revealed another dimension of Sarah's capabilities. In emergency medical services, she had often been the calm voice that coordinated between different agencies: police, fire department, and hospital staff. This experience translated perfectly to military operations, where successful missions required seamless communication between different units and specialties. Drill Sergeant Thompson, who had initially doubted Sarah's potential, began to see something exceptional in her development. Unlike many recruits who excelled in either physical training or classroom instruction, Sarah was becoming proficient in both. More importantly, she displayed the kind of tactical thinking and adaptability that couldn't be taught. It had to be earned through real-world experience under pressure. The culminating field exercise was a week-long simulation that tested everything the recruits had learned. Teams were given complex missions that required them to move across hostile territory, engage enemy forces, and complete objectives while managing limited resources and time constraints. Sarah found herself naturally taking on leadership roles, using her experience in crisis management to help her team navigate the challenges. During one particularly difficult night mission, Sarah's squad became separated from the main force and found themselves pinned down by simulated enemy fire. While others in the group began to panic, Sarah quickly assessed the situation and developed a plan to outflank the opposing force. Her ability to remain calm and think clearly under pressure allowed her team to complete their objective when other squads failed. The training culminated with graduation ceremony, where families gathered to see their sons and daughters transformed into soldiers. Sarah's parents made the trip from Chicago, barely recognizing the confident, capable woman who had replaced their daughter, the ambulance driver. The physical transformation was obvious. Sarah was stronger and more athletic than she had ever been. But the mental transformation was even more dramatic. After basic training, Sarah was selected for advanced individual training in combat medicine, a natural fit given her emergency medical background. However, her exceptional performance during basic training had caught the attention of special operations recruiters. They saw in her a rare combination of medical expertise, tactical ability, and the kind of unshakable composure that Special Forces units required. The Special Operations Assessment was held at a classified location where the Army tested candidates for its most elite units. The evaluation process was designed to identify soldiers who could perform complex missions in hostile environments with minimal support. For 2 weeks, Sarah endured physical challenges that made basic training look easy, mental tests that pushed her problem-solving abilities to their limits, and psychological evaluations that probed her motivations and resilience. The final test was a simulated prisoner rescue mission in a mock village populated with actors playing hostile forces and civilians. Sarah's team had to infiltrate the area, locate and extract a captured soldier, and escape without causing civilian casualties or losing team members. The scenario required perfect coordination, split-second decision-making, and the ability to adapt when the original plan fell apart. Sarah's medical background proved crucial during this exercise. When one of her teammates was wounded by simulated enemy fire, she had to provide medical treatment while continuing to fight and coordinate the mission. Her ability to compartmentalize, to simultaneously treat a patient while remaining tactically aware of her surroundings, impressed the evaluators who were watching from concealed positions. The mission succeeded, but barely. Sarah's team extracted the prisoner and reached the designated extraction point, but only after overcoming several unexpected complications that had caused other teams to fail. The evaluators noted that Sarah had been the key decision-maker during the most critical moments, displaying the kind of battlefield leadership that couldn't be taught in any classroom. 3 months later, Sarah received orders that would change her life again. She was being deployed to Afghanistan as part of a special operations unit tasked with conducting high-risk missions in some of the most dangerous regions of the country. The woman who had once navigated the streets of Chicago to save lives was about to enter a world where those same instincts would be tested in ways that would forge her into something entirely new. As she prepared for deployment, packing gear and saying goodbye to family, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. The scared young woman who had stepped off the bus at Fort Benning no longer existed. In her place stood a warrior, trained and ready for whatever challenges awaited in the mountains and valleys of Afghanistan. The making of a legend. The C-130 transport plane descended through the thin mountain air toward Bagram Airfield, carrying Sarah and her special operations team into the heart of Afghanistan. Through the small window, she could see the rugged landscape that would become her new reality. Endless mountains, deep valleys, and scattered villages that seemed unchanged by centuries of conflict. The contrast with the flat streets of Chicago couldn't have been more dramatic. Forward Operating Base Shank, located in the volatile Logar province, became Sarah's new home. The base was a collection of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and guard towers surrounded by the constant threat of insurgent attacks. Unlike the controlled chaos of emergency medical calls, this environment presented dangers that could materialize from any direction at any moment. Sarah's first weeks in Afghanistan involved acclimatizing to the altitude, the climate, and the completely different operational tempo of a war zone. Her unit, designated as a specialized combat medical team, was responsible for supporting high-risk missions in areas where conventional medical evacuation was impossible or too dangerous. These missions required them to operate far from friendly forces, often for days at a time, in terrain controlled by Taliban fighters. The team leader, Captain James Morrison, was a seasoned Special Forces officer who had completed multiple deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Initially skeptical about incorporating a former ambulance driver into his tight-knit unit, Morrison quickly recognized that Sarah brought capabilities that complemented the team's existing strengths. Her medical expertise was obvious, but her tactical awareness and ability to make quick decisions under pressure were equally valuable. The first real test came during a mission to establish medical support for a village raid in a remote valley near the Pakistani border. Intelligence indicated that a high-value Taliban commander was hiding in the area, but the terrain made helicopter evacuation impossible if casualties occurred. Sarah's team would have to infiltrate on foot, provide medical support during the operation, and be prepared to treat and evacuate wounded soldiers using only ground routes through hostile territory. The 10-mile hike to the target area took the team through some of the most challenging terrain Sarah had ever encountered. Rocky mountain paths, river crossings, and areas with no cover from potential sniper positions tested every aspect of their training. Sarah carried not only her personal weapons and equipment, but also an expanded medical kit that could handle everything from gunshot wounds to complex trauma injuries. The village raid began at dawn, with Sarah positioned at a concealed observation point where she could monitor the operation and respond quickly if medical assistance was needed. What was planned as a simple capture operation turned into a fierce firefight when the Taliban commander's guards proved more numerous and better armed than intelligence had suggested. Within minutes of the first shots being fired, Sarah received a desperate radio call. 2 soldiers had been hit by enemy fire and needed immediate medical attention. One had taken a bullet to the chest that had punctured his lung, while the other had suffered a complex leg wound from an improvised explosive device that threatened to cause him to bleed out within minutes. Sarah's response was immediate and instinctive. Grabbing her medical kit, she sprinted across 200 yards of open ground under enemy fire to reach the wounded soldiers. The same steady hands that had once guided an ambulance through Chicago traffic now worked to stop arterial bleeding and stabilize a collapsed lung while bullets snapped overhead. Her emergency medical training, combined with her military conditioning, allowed her to provide life-saving treatment under conditions that would have been impossible for conventional medics. But Sarah's contribution to the mission went far beyond medical support. When the team's communications specialist was wounded, she took over radio coordination, directing air support and managing the complex logistics of evacuating casualties while the firefight continued around them. Her experience in coordinating multiple agencies during emergency calls translated perfectly to managing the various military units involved in the operation. The most critical moment came when enemy fighters attempted to outflank the American position. Sarah spotted the movement first, using her tactical awareness to identify the threat before anyone else noticed it. Without hesitation, she engaged the enemy fighters with her rifle, demonstrating the marksmanship skills she had developed during training. Her accurate fire not only eliminated the immediate threat, but also bought precious time for the wounded soldiers to be stabilized and prepared for evacuation. The successful completion of this mission established Sarah's reputation within the special operations community. Word spread quickly about the former ambulance driver who had performed like a seasoned combat veteran during her first real engagement. What made her performance even more remarkable was that she had simultaneously fulfilled multiple roles: medic, communications coordinator, and combat soldier, with equal effectiveness. Over the following months, Sarah participated in increasingly complex and dangerous missions. Her unique combination of medical expertise and tactical skills made her invaluable for operations where conventional support wasn't available. She treated everything from gunshot wounds to traumatic brain injuries, often under fire and always under conditions that would have challenged the most experienced emergency room doctors. The mission that would define Sarah's legend took place in the mountains near the Afghan-Pakistani border. A reconnaissance team had been ambushed and pinned down by a large Taliban force. The team's medic had been killed in the initial attack, leaving several wounded soldiers without medical support. Helicopter extraction was impossible due to enemy surface-to-air missiles, and ground reinforcement would take hours to reach the isolated position. Sarah's team volunteered for an emergency rescue mission that military planners considered extremely high risk. They would have to travel 15 miles through enemy-controlled territory, fight their way to the trapped soldiers, provide medical treatment, and then lead the combined force to safety. The odds of success were so low that the mission was initially denied authorization. Sarah's response to this decision surprised everyone, including her commanding officers. She requested permission to address the mission planners directly, something almost unheard of for a soldier of her rank. In a brief but passionate presentation, she outlined a plan that leveraged her unique skills and experience. She argued that her background in emergency medical services had taught her to succeed in situations that others considered impossible. The mission was approved, and Sarah found herself leading a rescue operation that would test every skill she had developed during her transformation from ambulance driver to special operations soldier. The journey to reach the trapped team required navigating through Taliban checkpoints, crossing rivers swollen by mountain snowmelt, and moving across open terrain where a single mistake could result in the entire team being killed or captured. When they finally reached the pinned-down reconnaissance team, Sarah discovered a medical situation that was even worse than reported. 3 soldiers had life-threatening injuries that required immediate surgical intervention, while 2 others had wounds that would prove fatal without proper treatment within hours. Working by moonlight and using only the most basic equipment, Sarah performed medical procedures that saved lives under conditions that defied everything she had learned about emergency medicine. The extraction took 18 hours, during which Sarah's team fought running battles with Taliban forces while carrying wounded soldiers across some of the most difficult terrain in Afghanistan. Sarah herself treated patients, coordinated defensive positions, and at one point single-handedly held off an enemy assault that threatened to overrun their position. Her performance during this mission earned her decorations usually reserved for the most elite Special Forces operators. The rescued reconnaissance team included soldiers from multiple units, and their stories of Sarah's heroism spread throughout the military community in Afghanistan. She became known as the soldier who could perform miracles under impossible circumstances, the medic who fought like a Navy SEAL, and the warrior who never gave up on a patient or a mission. When Sarah's deployment ended and she returned to the United States, she carried with her a reputation that had been forged in the mountains of Afghanistan. The former Chicago ambulance driver had become a legend among special operations forces, proving that heroism could emerge from the most unexpected backgrounds. Her story became an inspiration to countless other soldiers, demonstrating that with courage, determination, and the right training, ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things. Sarah's transformation was complete, but her story was far from over. The skills and experience she had gained in Afghanistan would continue to shape her life and career, as she carried the lessons learned in combat back to a world that seemed both familiar and forever changed by her incredible journey from ambulance driver to battlefield hero.